Charles, aka the Humble Mechanic, and I drove to Atlanta, bought an all-original 84 Scirocco, drove it to Florida, swapped the engine, then drove it home all in 4 days. We have an awesome 3-episode series on that disaster of a week, but this video is a disaster before the disaster. To prep for our swap, we bought a $500 2.8-liter 24-valve VR6 engine that came out of a running Mark IV Jetta. We were under the impression it just needed timing chains, but it needed a lot more than just that. In this video, watch Charles and I build this engine before we shipped it to Florida for the swap. So today we are going to be tearing down our VR to put chains on it and also freshen it up so that it doesn't have any...
Oh wait,
we
forgot this part. You can't put chains on a VR or any other engine without chain gang in it like this. I got the little one.
I have my chain gang shirt on, by the by. Look at that. So I purchased this engine from a local friend of ours, has a 6-speed manual transmission on it, and it came out of a Mark IV that was running. This is a 24-valve BDF engine, if you're familiar. So it's a 2.8 with 24 valves as opposed to 12 valves.
24 valves of fury.
Yeah, 24 valves of fury. It needed chains when it came out of the car. It was running. So in theory, we are going to do some inspection to verify that there's no damage or contact of any kind, but in theory this should be just a time it up, put chains on it, freshen everything up, and it should be good to go. It never goes that way. Yuck.
What's wrong with that?
Get a bunch of goo coming out
The
of
intake
that.
runners are just kind of goopy, but they're not too bad. We're gonna take this gasket off too because we got a new one. I hope. Well, I said I hope while I was pulling it. That's
That's the time to hope.
That's the time to hope. But yeah, it is kind of goopy and gross in there. Engines are gross. That's what they do. This is a fuel injector connector. This is what happens when you get things that age. If you take a look here, there are pieces of the connector that the entire surrounding snapped off. So not just the tab that I pushed on, they just get brittle and old. So plastic, you'll go to take it off, and oh, exactly like that. If you heard it,
You could hear the glory.
you're supposed to push on that tab and have it slide, release. Oh, that cylinder hole is filled with water.
Look at all that crusty.
So they didn't do a great job. I have a feeling at this current juncture, every one of these connectors is going to break. Yep.
We're shooting for 100%.
We're shooting for 6 out of 6. Okay, ready?
Glorious.
Ready? You got one more. Ready? That's how you do. So what's supposed to happen is this guy, that little tab, you push down on this part where my finger is, and then it's supposed to release on the inside. And instead, this one just releases itself off the housing altogether.
Here's how you know someone that does not work on Volkswagens and Audis has worked on this car recently. All this RTV does not need to go on there to prevent it from leaking. Shockingly, if you just do a good job installing it and put a new seal on it and don't put old crusty parts back on the car, they don't leak until they do.
This is what's known as the crack pipe, this one right here. As you can see,
it's full of crack.
It is a pipe.
Oh my God, look
And
at how
it's a pipe, and then it has like a carb like a crack pipe would have. And so,
he sounds like he's speaking from experience.
listen, crack is whack. In the words of Whitney Houston,
sorry, I installed that oil filter.
This engine doesn't look particularly healthy.
it doesn't.
No.
I mean, it's probably a 200,000 mile engine. I think it was something like that when.
It would be a little easier if we didn't have a moron working with us that forgot the engine stand holder, me. But it's super easy when it's out of the car. Even in the car, really, these aren't all that bad to do.
This is likely to be our car, I believe.
Yeah, it's
Can I purchase it from you?
your new whip, bro.
Yeah, I'll sell it. That's what I told him. I said, somebody here will probably want to buy it.
How much you selling it for?
Bro, we have zero idea what we're gonna do with this thing, or how much it's gonna cost.
About tree fitting.
The only thing we know so far is this engine is $500.
So Paul, how'd that $500 engine work out?
So that engine ended up costing significantly more than $500. You'll see later in this video all the other problems we had with the actual building of the engine, but that doesn't even factor in. If you haven't seen the series that we shot with the Scirocco, we had a bunch of other later problems that we ran into.
It got bad.
So we will link to that down in the description where you can check that out.
So we complained about the TSI carbon buildup. This is out of that VR6. All the yuck, that's on the short runners. The head has different length runners, so you'll have a long intake runner and a short exhaust runner, and a short intake runner and a long exhaust runner.
You use one cylinder head for it, so the intake for the back cylinder has to come all the way from here to that cylinder. So same thing on this one, and so that's why they alternate short and long, is because they're alternating going to the back cylinders. And he stepped on a duck or a goose.
Oh, that's like one of those where you feel like your guts fall out right before you have a really bad morning in the bathroom.
Cardboard. This is to ensure you don't bust a hole in your block. Cardboard. I'm sure I've talked about it. I'm sure he's talked about it.
Yeah, I got a lot of crap because a real mechanic wouldn't use something like that.
A real mechanic wouldn't ensure he doesn't f shit up. I guess.
Real mechanic.
The other day. Oh, hey, this thing had green coolant in it. Fun fact, you can see a faint tinge, I don't know, you probably won't see it on camera, but there's a faint tinge of green coolant in this, on this hose. So, that's neat. This is when it happens when you mix coolant. When you mix, it was clogged. It was clogged, and I've busted it loose. So don't mix your coolant at home, kids. I love how we're using a 3/8 with an adapter when we can just use a real 1/2 inch. Piece of cake.
Yeah, we're done.
Didn't even require any effort. Would you like to pump so we can get this water out of here?
Prize bottle.
This feels like it's going to be a disaster.
It could be. I'm gonna put my hand underneath of it. Oh yeah. You like that I can feel it?
I like, well, no, like when you're prying off, you can feel that.
They didn't do a great job changing oil. Look at this. This situation here is
crustastic.
Yeah.
That's okay. That won't hinder our performance too much.
We'll see how much horsepower this baby can handle with being poorly maintained for 200,000 miles.
Yikes!
There's still water in there.
Apparently, we didn't get that one out all the way. Here you go. I thought I had sucked it out all the way, but apparently I had not sucked it out all the way.
This is the upper timing chain tensioner. Ooh, feel that.
Is it feel kind of squishy? Feels like there's not a lot of tension on it, but that's what
feels about the same.
200,000 miles.
Probably weared out.
There we go. There we go. Yucky.
That is. Do we have any rubbage?
No.
It might have just rubbed the crust a little.
It was early rubbage. Yeah.
Here we have the original chain guide that came off. This is the guide for the upper chain, and then this is a new one. And these chains were wearing into the guide, so this groove right here is actually caused by the chain rubbing it due to lack of tension or stretched timing chain. This is what that guide should look like. Nice and smooth surface versus a surface with a groove in it.
I'm currently scraping with my fingernails the bottom of this oil pan. It's producing quite a bit of contents, and really what you can do, more importantly, is look at the area I've been scraping with my fingers and see this bottom of this oil pan is kind of gooky.
What happened to it?
It's kind of gooky. I'm gonna go on a limb and say, as we've seen thus far, the oil change situation has been a little bit on the light side.
All right, so I'm gonna take the cams out so that we can do a cylinder leak down test and make sure we don't have any leak down of the valves or the piston rings or anything unhappy like that. Got it.
This engine smells terrible. This thing's been torched. Wow, this journal's really stained.
Wow, look at that one, yeah.
These are really stained. They're not really scored though, but they're like really poorly stained. So we want to inspect the health of this engine before we completely rebuild it and then put it in a car. So we're going to use this borescope to inspect each cylinder, and then we're also going to do a leak down test to make sure it's not leaking. Well, what's that right there?
That looks like wet, crusty water.
It does look, it looks crusty. I don't know what that is though.
Ooh, look at that.
Is that unhappy?
It's kind of gooky on the side. It could just be
Oil,
gook
yeah.
from it spinning around.
Yeah. Now we are going to do a cylinder leak down test. We roll our gauge pressure up. Our pressure is at, what is that? Little over 80, probably 82 or 83. We have about 9% leak in the cylinder. That's actually not terrible. We're testing how well the cylinder overall is sealing, how well the valves on the intake side, the exhaust side, and the piston rings are sealing.
Ooh.
And this one's quite a bit more, but I also don't think I have this piston up at TDC. One of the advantages of pulling the camshafts out to do this test is that then you don't ever have to worry about whether you're at TDC compression or not, because all of the valves should be closed.
That one sounds worse.
That one does sound worse.
I think that cylinder is kind of not good.
Yeah. And it would be ideal to know all the cylinders, but if you have one cylinder, the repairs essentially start to become the same. An engine like this, you wouldn't want to take one piston out and do one set of rings. You would want to take them all out. And we did confirm that it's not leaking out of the intake valves, it's not leaking out of the exhaust valves, it's coming down through the bottom, so it's blowing past the piston rings.
So we're gonna re-ring it. We're gonna put rings in it.
Ring, ring. Yeesh.
Yeah, that one's a big yikes.
Yeah.
I believe that's maybe leaking there. It seems like maybe we got a valve situation here. So what you're seeing there is actually compressed air that actually comes from shop air, and it's forced into the cylinders to check if it's holding all that air in there.
Right, so what you're seeing is the mist that we sprayed in there actually getting blown back out of the intake because it's not holding that pressure that we put into the cylinder, which means we have a leaking intake valve, and off to the machine shop it goes. Nothing like buying a $500 engine that you then immediately have to completely disassemble. That is far more work than we had planned.
That was not the plan. We were supposed to put chains on it, and that was going to be the end.
We were going to chain gang it and then roll it.
It didn't work out.
Not at all.
We're removing the cylinder head, which requires phoning a friend when you have the engine block out of the car, because it moves on you. Tag team situation. Oh, hold on.
Oh my God, he wasn't ready.
I wasn't ready.
No, he's still not ready.
Whoa.
He's still not ready.
Oh, hold on. Let me get a grip
Oh my gosh.
in a different way, because apparently the way you're turning is not good for the way I'm turning. You're just yanking it like a Neanderthal.
I am pretty strong.
He went to the gym one time.
Yeah.
Yay!
Wow.
It's like the easiest. It stanks.
That's
Yep, it does stank. This is what happens when you mix coolant. That's what happens when you mix coolant. Is all that crusty stuff gets in your cooling system. Over there too.
Is that part of like a gasket?
It's a dongle.
No, look at that. Doesn't belong in there.
What is that?
I don't know.
Well, there's some duty in this hole too.
What the heck? I bet you that's that dang silicone that was in the. Is that a coolant passage?
Yeah, these are coolant passages.
But like this right here?
I bet you that's what it is. Yep, I bet you that's what it is.
Oh man,
So this is why you don't RTV a bunch of shit either, is all RTV that's stuck in this passage. That's a coolant passage right there.
Wow.
So when you RTV a bunch of shit and it goes inside of all your, through your cooling
Jeez,
system,
But this is an RTV.
that's from mixing. There is no way the proper amount of cooling is flowing through this thing.
What the heck is that?
Oh, we might need to get
Dude,
Ugh.
that does not belong in an engine. I don't know what the heck that is. It's because there's no paper. It feels like paper.
It's kind of squishy, like a small amount of RTV that's really swollen. I think that's what it is. Well, I guess better to find out now.
Yeah.
this engine's pretty gross. It's disgusting. It's broken. It doesn't
Gross, you
work.
mean like sick? Can't believe how sick, gross that engine is.
Because a normal engine stand would bolt to the back of the engine. Well, we need to get access to that for the timing chain. So Eurowise has this really cool mount that mounts to this back side of the engine back here. These 4 bolt holes right there, 6 bolt holes right there. And I have one, and it's really awesome, and I forgot it.
What are you doing over there, Paul?
Me? Well, attempt to start to clean up our mess so that we can go shoot our podcast. Check out our podcast.
Hashtag podcast. Hashtag blessed.
Owning the barbarian sword.
Yeah.
And they have the, I mean, you think back in the old days, look at how big this thing is. Swinging this as a sword.
You could kill
We were too small to be doing all that.
I am not man enough.
I am not a barbarian. Hold on.
Ready? Watch your butt.
Yeah.
It's coming off the thing. All right, hang on. This is like 180 newton meters plus 180 degrees.
So after we figured out that we had major mechanical issues, what we did is we tore everything down, ripped the pistons out, and prepped everything so that we could send it off to the machine shop. Now we're back. We have our engine back to the machine shop. We had them do the block where they dunked it, cleaned it up, and then Charles so kindly has done some work on that. We have our cylinder head. It has all new valves and valve guides as well as valve seals put in it. And so we are ready to clean up the rest of our stuff and install our engine.
Yeah, you see these, this amount of parts here on the table in front of us is really just a fraction of all the stuff we're going to be putting on. A ton of bolts, ton of hardware, a ton of other stuff. I think though it is time to actually do work instead of stand here and talk about all these parts. So
Let's do
get
some
busy.
stuff.
A couple of things we're going to do on the bottom end. We're going to re-ring the pistons and we're going to put new connecting rod bearings in it. One of the things we need to do though is we need to get all this crust out of our ringlands. This is a piston after coming out of the parts cleaner. Looks really nice. But what I do to clean these ringlands is I take one of the old rings, I slightly file it down, and then I just use it to clean all that yuck out of there. So yeah, we want to make sure that none of this yuck is on our piston before we reinstall it.
Well, fun fact, when you use harsh chemicals, it turns your gloves into what looks like something of like weird ballooned Mickey Mouse hands.
It's like you've been in the pool for too long.
Yeah, it kind of does. It does have that really pool, too long in the pool kind of situation. If you look here, all of this gunk that's inside there, it was all one solid sheet of black gunk, and I've removed most of it, as you can see. And as you can see, there's gross stuff everywhere. This oil pan has a brown liquid in it. I'm in the dirty area.
Okay, time to put the crankshaft bearings in. These are actually two different bearings, an upper and a lower, or as we're looking at it here, this one's going to be a lower. You can see that little cutout right there lines up with this oil galley right here to lubricate the crankshaft. And of course, the theme of putting an engine together, make sure everything's clean.
Me, I'm mostly cleaning and then just reassembling this valve cover that I had to disassemble to clean all the shit out of it because this engine is completely disgusting.
Why did you buy such a disgusting engine?
So at the time I didn't realize how nasty it was, and frankly, given the cost of rebuilding this entire engine, this was a terrible idea, this entire process.
Did the ad say it just needed a fuel pump or an AC recharge?
Totally just needs a cam sensor because it's got timing faults, that's all. What I probably should have done before we got too deep into this was probably just scrap it and buy a 3.2 or a 3.6 VR6, but I make terrible life choices, so here we are.
So I'm just cleaning up the crankshaft before we install that, which is what comes next. It's in pretty decent shape. Just want to get any old yuck off of it that I possibly can.
Also, if you take a look, our fuel line here is kind of dry rotted, so that's a mild concern, but we'll probably just run these and see if it catches on fire. I like to live dangerously. This is like really sticky goop that's inside the intake manifold. I assume this is just carbon from
Oh my gosh.
the crank recirculation, but it's like really goopy. We're gonna try to clean it the best we can for the time being. We may have to try to get a different manifold for this thing. Got some pieces coming out with it.
All right, we're gonna drop in our crankshaft next.
I'm getting dirty while Charles just took the clean job.
Who knew putting the engine together would be the clean part?
I'm like the custodian of the parts. What we like to do is, this is called composite material. In the automotive world, when we'd like to talk shit about things, we call them plastic, and then when we want to put them in a positive light, we call them composite material.
How heavy is that plastic
It's
manifold?
pretty light, actually. If this was made of metal, it'd be very heavy. Plastic is not going to transmit heat, so you don't have to worry about phenolic heat transfer? Whatever. Transfer between, you need a phenolic spacer if you have too much heat transfer.
All right, so got the new bearings in for the crankshaft. Now we're gonna torque our main caps, starting from the middle, working our way out. 30 Neutron meters plus 180 degrees per bolt.
Well, right now I'm cleaning an oil pan, partially because I dumped all the junk from the other things into this, and partially because this thing was disgusting. So all the stuff that I dumped from the other stuff is out of it, but as you can see, there's a ring of grossness around the edge that I'm scraping off because we don't want any of that junk in our fresh new engine, fresh new old engine.
Now we are doing the additional 180 degrees. So these are ones that haven't been done with the mark at 12 o'clock. And then I know at a quick glance, they've gone 180 degrees because our marks are at 6 o'clock. So quick way to look and make sure you got everybody torqued.
I'm still over here cleaning. We're about to wear out this wire brush that was brand new at the beginning of this. It's the bristles are getting quite bent and disheveled at this point.
These are high performance stage 5, I assume calico coated, upgraded connecting rod bearings. Definitely a worthwhile upgrade on this engine. Even if you're just stock, this is a pretty good upgrade. In this engine, one of the very few weak points is the connecting rod bolts. So we got ARP rod bolts as well. Ooh, little excited there.
Okay, so we had a friend stop by and drop off a ring compressor because we were ill prepared. One thing to note if you're pushing a piston in always is if it doesn't feel right, to stop and reset your situation. So you check and see, because what happened is, if you look right here, this bottom ring has actually popped out a little bit from the ring compressor, which is why we're having a problem. And then we try again. This is a valve cover gasket.
Why do you want that right now?
Well, right now I'm gonna put it in the valve cover because I broke one of the oil rings and Charles is now...
It's a little gun shy.
I'm a little gun shy and I'm scared, so I've now handed the baton to him.
This shot looks so sad. Like you're just working. Like you're just sad and you're working on top of a trash can.
Working over a trash can. Remember I said if you feel like you need to stop, you should just stop. Well, I didn't feel that, but I still broke an oil ring. That's all the carbon that came out of our intake together. I rolled it into a ball. A dewey ball.
Sometimes things get weird.
Also, when I was cleaning our dipstick, this is what happened. So I went to wipe this end off and it completely broke apart, as you can see here. So this was what stopped it when you put it in the hole like this. And now just goes right on in. Well, Charles has finalized installing all the pistons because he took on the non-scared role.
I laid on the grenade.
And so now we're spinning it over.
Yeah, we're just making sure it moves and everybody's happy, and plus, like, this looks super cool, so.
Yeah, VR6. This is a tip that Charles gave for painting engine blocks, which I had never heard before and I thought was really neat, is if you put your tape on like this, and then you take a hammer, this is a rubber mallet, and then you hit it, you can just keep hammering it, and then eventually, as you see, it will push around the circle, and then you can get a perfect circle just like this, and then you can just peel off the excess. This one didn't work out as well as I hoped. This one I'm gonna have to use a razor to clean up a little, but it still made it easier because it's an odd shape. So what was the torque spec on that?
40 pound-feet of torque.
What's the Newton meters on that?
I don't know.
Something like 55 or something in non-American. But good thing this is America and we measure things in freedom units.
Bald eagles. Bald eagles.
The craziest part about the horsepower as a unit of measure is you would think that it's like 1 horse equals 1 horsepower. And maybe you could standardize in some way. It's not. That is not what a horsepower is. A horsepower is like some sort of measurement of how fast something lifts based off of certain, it's horse. It is not a horse.
All right, we got our gasket on, we got our dowels on, everybody's cleaned.
See how long he wants to hold on to that for.
I'm trying to grab it less.
Why don't you give it to me so I can help you?
Wait a minute.
He's way too cool for school.
That was
The flippy guy? Nah, it's on a stud. It's all right.
boom. All right, fire it up.
Ready to start up. Fun fact, VR6s have 2 different head bolt sizes. Long ones
Long ones go down
and
the middle.
short ones.
AAA VR has 3 different head
They do
bolt
have 3
sizes,
different ones.
which is super fun.
Because they don't, I think they have ones on the outside.
Yeah.
On the outside edge.
Ooh. That was awesome.
I really enjoyed that.
I'm gonna try and do another one.
You're not going to duplicate that, so.
I'm gonna try it.
Yep.
Let me try it again. Oh man. Oh man.
Oh, that was a satisfying one.
Beautiful.
Crushed it.
Nailed it.
Absolutely crushed it. Okay, rematch. We got one more left. 3, go. Oh,
That was pathetic. Let's do it again.
oh, that was, yours is pretty good on that one.
All right, so we got the 30 Newton meters, 50 Newton meters. Now we're gonna do all of them 90 degrees, and then all of them again, another 90 degrees. It's fun.
He's gonna be pretty exhausted after all these 90s. There's a lot of 90s.
20 90s.
40 90s.
Oh yeah.
Marking them in a specific spot on all of them helps with your 90s because you know at the end they gotta face the same direction. Fun facts with Charles and Paul. That would be a bad day if something happened here. There should be nothing to see except for him double and
Grunting?
triple checking, grunting, and then double checking that he's on the right bolt next.
All right, so these are just setting the cams into place. We'll go through the timing process in a minute. I'm just trying to get everything kind of laid out and prepped because we got all this blank stuff to do too. So, yeah. Well, it's 3 a.m. We've had a day.
We surrendered.
Some victories. Mostly. We have some more work to do in the morning to kind of level up for the next steps. And you know what? I'm just not going to even mince words. I'm not super thrilled about how today went.
Today sucked.
It pretty much sucked. Well, we said the day sucked. And it wasn't necessarily 1 or 2,500 giant things.
Mostly a lot of very small little things that delayed the entire process of building the engine and a lot of roadblocks we hit. So that's why we're there so late and we had to solve a bunch of problems and then continue.
Often those little hurdles seem to be way harder to jump over than one massive one. As long as you don't punch a hole through the block, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll move on and get this thing together.
Tomorrow's another day where we'll make it better. Since our engine didn't come with an accessory bracket, we use this Eurowise mini alternator setup, which comes with a bracket to bolt to the block and gives us better clearance with the alternator. Okay, so right now we're about to put our cam adjusters onto our stuff here, and what we want to point out is right here on each camshaft, right there, and then right here, there's a hole that actually corresponds with this dowel pin right here. This is an alignment to make sure that everything is lined up properly. So the rest of these are all oil passages for the variable valve timing stuff. So you have to line that up for it. It's a good secondary check. They're supposed to be pointing in a diagonal upward left direction here, and then we can get them installed.
This dowel lining up with this opening here, there's also a scribe arrow right here on the variator that when you have it properly timed will line up to this mark right here in yellow on the cam bridge. What can happen is you can get the cam on, don't put that bolt in just yet, you can get the cam on and lined up with that dowel. This is because you have variable valve timing, so it can move the cam both forward and backward. And actually on the intake side, you have even more adjustment.
Okay, so Charles called this a scribe. I call this more like sad Christmas tree. That is kind of like an arrow facing in that direction with a bunch of lines.
Either way though, whichever you prefer to call it, another check that you want to do is to count the rollers between the marks. So from this mark on the intake cam to this mark on the exhaust cam, you should have 16 of the chain rollers in between. So if you look at your sad Christmas tree,
the right here,
and go towards the exhaust side, and then your sad Christmas tree on the exhaust side, it's 16 of the circles of the rollers between the two.
Okay, so when you're timing the chains, the main stuff you're gonna need is to get this timed properly on the cam side. So we showed you the other marks on the other side there. You also wanna get this plate in place as a special tool that actually locks in, because there are notches in the cams here that allow you to, that are cut so that you know they're in time. So that is like this, locks in place, and we know we're good up here.
Okay, so we're gonna start our timing with our lower timing chain that connects the crankshaft to this intermediate gear right up here. You need to set the crankshaft to TDC first. There's two ways to verify that. One, there's a notch right here on the block that lines up with a tooth that has sort of a flat edge on it. That shows TDC. Then what we do is we put the chain on and we come back up here. This larger gear, which also drives the oil pump, has a small pointer on it right there in yellow, and that has to line up with that line on the cover behind it, or basically just point to 12 o'clock. And then these two gears are keyed together, so once you have the big gear timed, the little gear is going to be timed as well, and then this is what will drive our camshafts. So up to this point, we've got piston rings, everything's been clean, head is on with new head gasket, new bolts. We just finished our timing set, rotated around twice to make sure all of our timing marks lined up. Now we got to bolt a bunch of stuff on.
You know, even when you're experienced, Charles obviously way more than me because he does 9 million VR6 things. He weighs more than me. He probably doesn't weigh more than me. He does all this VR6 stuff. He is used to this stuff. I don't time VR6s very often. But regardless of that, make sure it's in time again and double check your work.
To be clear, you want to do 2 rotations of the crankshaft so you get 1 full rotation of both cams.
Yeah, so if you only do 1 over here, on the back side here, this timing mark in the back will be on the bottom. That's how you know you're 180 out, or would be 180 out had you done 2 rotations on the crank. So that's confusing probably.
Also, if you are the type of person that marks the chain and rotate it around, keep in mind your marks on the chain will not line up for a whole bunch more revolutions. You need to look at those initial timing marks like Paul's Christmas tree and the little notch here to make sure that those 2 line up. And in this case anyway, 16 rollers between your marks. So just put a little bead of sealant around the lower cover, and yeah, then I'm going to install it. Said lower cover.
Ah, yes.
That's the sound of victory.
It's starting to look like something.
It is starting to look like something. Something that's going to be 200 horsepower as a Fury.
All right, time for the oil pan. You expect it to be like super climactic, and it's not.
Yeah. We're threading in the drain plug, and it's pretty impressive because even though this engine has really high mileage, the threads aren't destroyed on the oil pan, which is really rare for high mileage engines, but
this one's different because they clearly never changed the oils.
They didn't change the oil that much. So it wasn't used very often, which is, so to preserve the threads on your oil pan, don't change your oil.
Simple.
Easy.
Right.
Don't do that, it's not a good idea.
We're just gonna put a little bit of oil in it, and because we had the whole thing out and apart, we're gonna prime the oil system. So we can put some oil in it and then with a drill, run the gear that drives the oil pump at the back of the engine.
Fun fact, these bolt holes will leak oil through them if you don't have bolts in there. Oh.
Did you get that? Spinning the dowel that runs from this gear down to the oil pump will build up oil pressure in the engine, and eventually you'll get it all the way up to the top end. You do have to kind of go slow, or what you see that just happened will happen.
That's the sound of I just ate Taco Bell. All right, so these old injectors, they have really crusty seals on them. So we're just gonna swap these over. And as you can see, they're quite hard. And we get all new ones on there. So they'll be so fresh and so clean.
This is a water pipe that runs from the water pump over here to a coolant flange with the engine coolant temperature sensors that we're going to install in a minute. This is one of those fun parts that the community has a great name for. I'm not sure why, but they call it a crack pipe. I thought it was because the pipe always cracked, but I've been told that
Because it has a carb.
Oh. What's a carb?
I don't know. Carburetor. This is the coolant flange that goes to the crack pipe. This is an aluminum one from our dear friends at Eurowise. Here is their cover, you can see, with their logo on it. So,
for contrast, this is the plastic piece. And someone did a nice job putting a lot of RTV on there.
That was an engine block.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not.
Yeah, don't do this.
This is not.
Don't do this.
Good.
This is not an approved situation.
Yeah, it's a bad time.
This is the last time you're going to see the inside of this engine, because unless it goes outside the engine,
Oh,
we're ready to
man.
put the best valve cover on.
You didn't clean this thing well.
I cleaned it to the best of my ability. Okay. Yeah. Show before, now after, now before, now after. Look at this. It looks terrible, but it looks less terrible. Yeah, it's not purple and shiny like his.
Oh, mine is fresh.
His is fresh to death. I'm just not that fancy or that cool or that interested in taking the time to actually do that.
All right, so this is our flange we're gonna mount up to our metal crack pipe. This also has the thermostat here underneath it and a couple of coolant temp sensors. We're actually missing one of the plugs because we didn't want to reuse the plug that came out of that old plasticky one. And this actually just slides on like that and bolts up.
This is the old plug that came out of that disgusting engine and you can see that there are parts of it flaking off, which is why we don't want to reuse this. You say, well, why don't you just reuse it? It's like, oh, well, this degraded crap that's falling off of this is going to then circulate through this fancy new engine. New used 200,000 mile engine.
Remember when we bought this engine and we were like, yeah, we're just going to take it apart and then it'll probably be fine and then we're just going to...
And then it totally wasn't fine.
So everything fell apart from there.
At all. This went completely sideways and this $500 engine turned into like a $1,500 engine. To make this easier, we are going to put the flywheel on top of here. So we have this, so we're not fighting gravity the whole time because flywheels are heavy. And I don't like doing work. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, we have, this is a Black Forest Industries clutch kit with super fresh light and flywheel. Is they only go on one way on a lot of cars. So one of these holes around here is actually offset just a little bit. You can see this one here is closer to this opening than the rest of them are. So it's got to be clocked and only goes on one way. We're also going to clean this and make sure there's no, like, that fingerprint right there on it.
This is a stage 5 clinger right here, that one.
Did you hear what I just said to you? Stage 5? Let's go. I'm going to start the car. I'm serious. Let's go.
This is so clutch. This is a clutch. And we're going to have some fun.
It's never going to be happening.
I'm about to have a lot of fun.
Move.
Fun! Torquing those flywheel bolts. I'm holding it. That way it looks like I'm doing something.
Torque, 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 torque. So I just cleaned the pressure plate as well. That's on a brand new part. So there's no way that it'll be perfectly clean. 2 minutes worth of time well spent.
You see that? You see it? Do you see it? I'm gonna spray it again real quick, just give it a couple more wipes.
Next up, we got the clutch disc. This is a clutch disc alignment tool to make sure that the clutch is perfectly centered here at the back of the crankshaft. And that goes in like that. Satisfying.
So now we're about to put this trans on. We have our throwout bearing, our new one, installed here on our fork. And we have our axle flange out. So we're just gonna pop this on and bolt it to the engine. All right, 1, 2, 3, go. I got it. There we go.
It may seem silly having made that cardboard thing all that time ago, but that's why I do it. So it doesn't matter how long it is. You don't have to worry about forgetting where anything goes. And these, some of them, if you get them in the wrong hole, you can actually bust the block or bust the transmission, like poke a hole in a coolant jacket. So 2 minutes of organization is definitely worth the effort.
Okay, so this bolt right here, as I was snugging it down, I started feeling a lot of resistance, which is why in these situations you want to hand tighten that. So this bolt, the original trans we got with this thing was a 6-speed. This is a 5-speed because for the swap it makes more sense to go with a 5-speed. It's easier bolting. This is definitely wrong. So if we would have run this one all the way down, I probably would have bust through this transmission case and potentially had a problem. So we are going to find a shorter bolt to put in there. This is fluid we have to drain, but I don't have a lot of space left.
This is going to be a disaster.
It could be a disaster.
I already know.
Don't stop rolling.
17 millimeter Allen. You probably don't have one. ShopDAP.com has them though. Good news.
Is that our website?
Oh, it is our website as a matter of fact.
Oh,
How about that? ShopDAP.com. You ready for this?
it's going to miss the bucket, dude. I can see from my angle. Dude, I swear to you, from my
Bet
angle.
you're wrong.
That was a little close for my company.
It was a little closer.
Before it's spilled, like it's gonna catch it.
Dude, that's as far as it can go.
That's,
By the way, that's way too watery.
yeah, what's going on with that?
It seems like it's been raining rainwater inside of our transmission. This is not the consistency of transmission fluid.
Without being able to pry against the frame. Okay, so trans is bolted up. We got the starter on. We still got to deal with the axle flanges. We'll do that in a second. But before we get it on the little rolly stand, Paul's going to fill it with fluid. In order to do that, though, the engine and transmission have to be level. Put transmission fluid in it till it starts to drip out the fill hole. Put the plug back in, and you should be good.
Doing this in the car really blows because the whole radiator and all kinds of other stuff's in the way. Oh, there it is. And that is how you fill a trans. This is a 100 millimeter axle, as you can see there. This is the original axle flanges that came on this. This is 108 millimeters. This is the axle we need to use for this. And as you can see, this is the incorrect size.
You'll often see on like swap pages and stuff like that, someone saying you have to swap from 90 to 100 millimeter axle flanges, or bigger ones in this case. So this is something important to remember. And what Paul measured, he measured this inside diameter across the flange. So that's what you want to make sure the inside is 100 or 90 or whatever your car or axle is going to require.
Charles was talking and Nathan was filming the axle flange that I installed, and I didn't know where the bolt was, and so while this was happening, fluid was just leaking out of the transmission while he was talking. I was trying.
You should have just cupped your hand.
I just stuck a rag underneath of it, so I didn't have the bolt. I think he took out the bolt, so I didn't know
I had
where
it in my
was.
pocket. He couldn't have it.
We're gonna put the manifold and the harness on.
Yeah, why?
It's gonna look like an engine. Well, this kind of looks like an engine, but it's gonna look more like an engine. So this is the shift tower that goes on top of the transmission. This is where your reverse switch would go. Now, as you see, Charles so kindly put a line here that's yellow. This side's not very pretty. This side's a little bit better. This needs to be cut off because to clear the bracket for this that's designed, we can't have that there. So we're gonna cut that off. Here we go. So we finished cutting that off, and then I used a grinding wheel to actually get it flush, and then I cleaned up the threads a little bit, because my plan is, this is the reverse switch, so I had to make sure that all the threads went in all the way, because my plan is to actually buy a threaded piece that's just like an Allen. There's a plug that we can just Loctite and thread it in there and then block this off. To solve the problem that we have here with this tower, we have a hole, we have a bolt that we have in a drawer that every technician or former technician or fake technician like me has. So what we've done is threaded this into the hole. It is the correct thread pitch based on this, and we threaded it in, and we make sure we were in reverse here, and pushed it down to the end and then pulled it back. So you want to make sure, because if you thread this in too far, you're not going to have any reverse gear at all. None. So what the plan is, take it, we marked it, we're going to chop it off, grind it down again after thread locking it in there so that our trans doesn't have a gaping hole and isn't out there letting dirt and debris fall into your transmission.
All right, so part of what we're also doing is getting a couple of these bushings replaced in the shift tower. This cup is actually what the shifter ball sits into. And if you look right here, it's actually super duper worn out. For comparison, this is what it should look like. So actually a super affordable and pretty easy repair. There's a bracket that has to pop up, and then this just pops over the ball and slides down into place. Also, there's some bushings right here you can see are just completely come apart. Those are the bushings for when you push the shifter down for reverse. I'm gonna pop this spring off and replace those as well. And we also are having to replace one shift cable because this one is bent and sad, and so it doesn't run through its full range of motion. So that's gone, and one freshy shift cable. Here is our engine room harness from PDC shop. So we have our ECM side, this really cool stage 100 starter button, because surely the ignition switch is worn out. So we got this side, and then we got the actual engine. So this connects to the ECM here with this big connector. And this is all of our engine goodies, coils and injectors, among other things. These two harnesses actually plug in together, and we need to get part of this harness on, and mostly the injectors plugged in. Otherwise, when we put the intake manifold on, we'll not be able to get the injectors plugged in, these guys right here. So yeah, we're gonna lay it all out though and take a good look and make sure everything looks fresh.
So there is our engine build, and this is a good lesson. Everything we dealt with through this entire process is instructive to show you why, A, things like leak down test and pulling stuff apart is important when you're putting an engine in a car.
Even if you're doing it out of a running car, because allegedly this engine came out of a running car, it just needed chains. Had we not done any of that testing, slapped chains on it and sent it, we would have been toast. We would have not completed this project.
Forget about the fact that the cylinder 5 had that leak down issue and it would have ran poorly just because of that alone. The coolant jackets were all clogged with that never would have been addressed in any other way. That doesn't even bring into the fact that obviously our $500 engine turned into a $1,500 engine plus just with machine shop work and whatever else. It doesn't factor in if you were to pay somebody like us labor-wise to tear down an engine. So like you're getting to be a significant amount more money if you're paying a shop to do it. And on top of that, we had other issues during the build. If you haven't seen the build, or if you have seen the build, you know we had injector issues.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
We had a multitude of issues. So making sure things are working properly beforehand is a good lesson.
Vital. Also, if you haven't seen that series where we experience a ton of pain and sadness, you definitely need to check that out.
Link in the description.
Bye.
Big thank you to all the brands involved with this build. Most importantly, us, ShopDAP.com, Elite Motorworks, Dave over at TDC Shop was instrumental in getting us all the stuff we needed for this build. Eurowise for their engine swap parts, SoloWorks coilovers, Unitronic for the ECU tune, and BFI for the clutch parts.